to,
This meeting is being
you
recorded.
know, who have said that they would like to participate, but they can't, and could we please send them a recording? Now, I invite everybody here to please share at will, because I am not the only person who knows stuff about caregiving in this room. Everybody in this room is an expert on their person. And so you have experiences that you can share with other people. I just got a great email from somebody who said, "Hey, I listened to the recording from last week. Can you share my contact information with this other person who is on the call, because I think I can help her." Like, wow, that's pretty wonderful. What a way to build community. But anyway, however, so while I want you to share deeply and share from your heart, I also recognize that there may be things afterwards that you hang up the call and you're like, "Ah, I think I kind of overshared," or "I don't really want what I said to be shared out to the world." If that's the case, then by all means, just email me and say, "Hey, I don't really want the thing that I said in the recording," and I'll cut it out, okay? Because it takes me a few days to get to it anyway, so it's easy for me to edit it. So that said, the way that we run these sessions is that we have some kind of topic that I will just talk about and present to people. And we will then have exchange back and forth about that topic, but then we'll open it up to whatever it is that we want to talk about. And the topic that I chose today is how to know when and if it's time for long-term care. The thing that inspired me to want to talk about this is that while I was in Idaho on vacation, I got a phone call from a friend of mine who said, "Oh my God, my mom has had a stroke. She is in really bad shape, both physically and cognitively. We have no choice. I'm pretty sure we need to move her into long-term care." And there was just, she knew nothing. She didn't know where to start. She didn't have any idea what the options were or where to go, or is her mom even a candidate for long-term care? And I run into this all the time. People who either don't know whether it's an option for them, people who have a really hard time making that choice, like, "I'm pretty sure it's time, but I'm not sure." So anyway, I just wanted to chat about that today with you. So I titled this when, how and when to know if, if it's an option, right, for long-term care. The if is because for many people, long-term care isn't an option. And there are a host of reasons why. Affordability being one of the main ones, right? Long-term care, having somebody live in a long-term care community, unless you have long-term care insurance or some kind of a VA program that might help with it, or other kinds of funding, it's really expensive. So I like, how expensive. My husband was in a long-term care community that at the time, memory care was $12,500 a month. And then eventually, I know people who are in that community now and are paying $14,000 a month. And then eventually he moved into a smaller care community that was $7,000 a month. So who has that kind of change just lying around, right? So we wind up doing things like selling the house so that we have enough money, so that, or maybe spending all of our loved ones' savings. So I recognize that for a lot of people, it just isn't an option. It also could be that there isn't anything available near where you live, right? This is a huge and growing problem, and it is fully expected that we as a country are just going to run out of beds, that there aren't going to be enough places for people to live in long-term care. Like, that's just a fact. And so therefore, there's a lot of effort being made to increase the opportunities for people to stay at home. Even I know here in Washington State, at the state level, there's a lot of work going on to figure out how do we make it so that people can more effectively live with dementia at home. And that's where a lot of technology comes in. But anyway, um, and then another reason that people might not choose to move into long-term care is because of promises made. And let's see, Bill, if you would just mute all for just a moment. Because of promises made, right? Like, my mom said that she didn't want to move out of her house, and we promised her that we would never move out of her house. And so therefore we feel like that's not an option for her. And we'll talk more about that kind of issue that people run into in a little bit. So if long-term care is within the realm of possibility, meaning that it is somehow affordable and it is available, then what? Like, how do you know that it's time to go into long-term care? So when I was in a support group because I was caring for my husband with dementia, one of the things that we used to say to each other is like, if you need to ask, it's time, right? Or if you need to ask, it's probably 6 months too late. And sometimes that is the case. So if you're wondering whether it's time, maybe it's time, but I think that we can refine that a bit. My number one thing about is it time for someone to move into long-term care is safety first. Safety is a huge issue. So I'm going to just let me just share my screen for one quick second. Where I do know how to share my screen. There it is. Okay. So I'm going to go here for just a second. You see my document here, but you see this picture of me with my husband? No? Okay. Oh, hang on. Now do you see it? No? Hang on. I'll get there. There we go. Okay. So do you see a picture of me with my husband on the screen? You would know that that's me because my back is to you. This is an example of unsafe, right? This is me, how I would get my husband up and down the stairs. I'm 5'7", he's almost 6'2", he's over 200 pounds. I was probably at that time, like, 120-ish. And the way we would get downstairs is I would go backwards and I would keep moving his hand down the railing. Then with one hand, I would lift his leg. I would move it down to the next step. We did eventually, not on that staircase, but a different stairway, have an episode where I was doing my crazy thing of moving him down the stairs with me going backwards, and he fell on top of me, and I was trapped underneath him until somebody found us. So probably shouldn't have been doing that, right? It's also about so there are other aspects to safety, right? So one is like, can you safely care for the person at home? Are you physically capable of caring for the person at home? If they are larger than you are, maybe you're going to wrench your back trying to bathe them or trying to get them on and off of the toilet. We need to make sure that we are staying safe, but we also need to make sure that they're staying safe. So one of the key reasons that I see people moving into long-term care is because they're a wander risk. Maybe the person who's caring for them, living with them is a child, their adult child who's still working, or a spouse who's still working. I have no choice but to leave them home sometimes during the day and they take off. Or maybe even when we bring in a well-meaning caregiver to stay at home with them during the day when I'm out, they turn their back and bang, the person with dementia is gone, right? I do always recommend that if you have a person who is a wander risk, that you have them carry ID, that you have them wear like ID, meaning like a wallet that often has that could have a note in it, that if somebody finds them and is looking through it, there's a note that says, my name is, please call such and such. I used to always make sure that my husband had a phone and that it was charged. He couldn't use his phone anymore, but that way I could call him and he could still, if he could pick up his phone, he could still answer it, but he couldn't make calls, right? Or I'd be able to find him in a crowd because I would hear his phone ringing because I set it up with a unique ring, right? Or we do things like have something in like an Apple, tag somewhere in there on their person. Um, when my husband got lost one time, and the police found him, they suggested that I bring a picture of him to the local police station. They said, bring an 8x10 picture of him to the local police station so we can all see his face and we'll kind of know who this guy is. But wandering is definitely one of the reasons that people wind up moving into long-term care. If they're a fall risk, if I turn my back, I'm just not sure if he's going to fall. And we can't take that chance. So sometimes that sends people into long-term care. If we're worried that the person might hurt themselves or hurt others, like, I'm worried my mom's going to burn down the house, or she left the water running and the downstairs flooded. So if they are starting to do things that make it so that them, the rest of the family, the house itself could be damaged, that's often something that's a catalyst to moving people into long-term care. And I'm just going to pop into the chat for a second. Angela and caregiver burnout, we're getting there. And I like what Dawn said. that our police department has a dementia registry. Brilliant, right? That's a great thing to be a part of. And Angela adds, struggle with administering medications. Absolutely. Absolutely. That might be a reason that I say, you know what, I just kind of can't do this anymore. I do want to say that caregiver safety, I already talked about caregiver safety, like wrenching my back or falling down the stairs, but also if you're afraid, because that happens too. So my husband used to get, when he would get really agitated, he would go like this towards me. And he was like, inches away from pushing me, but yet he never actually did it. But what if he had? He was so much bigger than me. So I probably shouldn't have had myself in that situation. And I will admit that by the time I finally made the decision to support my husband moving into another place, it was a disaster. My kids were falling apart. I was falling apart. I waited way too long. We need to also remember that if we are thinking about placing somebody in long-term care, there may not be a space in your place of choice. So it's something that we need to start looking at early. We need to start thinking about the places that we might want to go. We might want to put ourselves on a waiting list so that when the time arrives, we'll be closer to the top of the waiting list. I do want to say, just going back to that caregiver safety piece, like me talking about my husband pushing me. The first thing that I do recommend to people is if you are living with a person who is getting angry and aggressive, is to take a step back and question whether there is another solution before you move them out of the house. One of the biggest problems is caregiver education. If I don't really understand how to communicate with a person who's living with dementia, I might be the one who's causing the problem. So that's number one. Number two, talk to your doctor. I do not advocate just randomly medicating people because if we can chill him out and make him sit in a chair, then he's not a problem. I don't advocate that. However, there are medications that can kind of take the edge off and reduce some of that anger and anxiety. So these are all things to look at before we say, that's it, he's getting angry, he's moving into long-term care. You need to look at how the demands of being a caregiver are impacting you physically, socially, emotionally, mentally. And so the comment about caregiver burnout is that is so legit. We do know that uh, caregivers, especially so caregivers in the world, whatever they're caregiving for, live with far more depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation than the general population. What we also know is that caregivers of people with dementia are far more impacted in those ways. So if you're living with increasing depression, anxiety, fear, that's not a sign that you're weak. It's not a sign that you're just not up to the job. It's a sign that it really is too much and it can legitimately become too much. And when we're feeling those ways, we need to get help. It may be time for somebody to go live in a different place where if you're the spouse, you get to be the spouse again instead of being the nurse. And that is another reason why people often make the decision to move into long-term care. I really just want to be the daughter again, or the mother, or the wife again, or the husband again. If you find that you're self-medicating, it's perhaps time to start thinking about maybe we need to do something differently here. I definitely drink less wine now. I was a dementia caregiver. If you're worried that you're going to die before he or she does, like I'm not going to my doctor's appointments, right? I'm unable to go out and get exercise. I've gained weight or lost weight. I feel like I'm not eating well. I look terrible. These are all legitimate reasons to think about whether or not it's really working for the person living with dementia to keep living at home. Some people draw the line at care activities. Like I I just am not a person who feels like I can help somebody with toileting, for instance. Or I do not feel comfortable with a slippery, wet person who's twice my size or half my size in the shower. I'm afraid I'm going to drop him or her. That is a reason to either bring somebody else who is a professional in to do those tasks, or maybe it's time to think about long-term care. We want that dynamic to stay healthy between the caregiver and the care recipient. Sometimes moving sooner is better than moving later. So I want to share a story with you. When I was doing some of my certifications to do dementia support, I volunteered in long-term care communities because I still was caring for my husband. But what I recognized is the old adage that if you have supported one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia, and that everybody is different. So in order to get my certifications, I had to support people other than my husband. And so I volunteered in long-term care communities so that I could help a variety of people. So one of the things that I did as an activity is I would bring in really awesome picture books that weren't insulting to share with an adult, but that had beautiful artwork or beautiful stories. And I would share them the way that a librarian does. Let me just grab a book. You know, the way that a librarian does it, where she's got the book and she holds it out for everybody to see. And I would go to each person as I'm reading the story. It sort of satisfied a dream of mine, being a story hour librarian. But anyway, this one time I was showing a book that was about a gentleman who moved from Japan to the United States. And the story started with this gentleman being in like, it was in like the 1940s. Yeah, it was right. Anyway, there was a woman who was in the room of people living with dementia. And when I would turn the page, she would say, "That's me. That's me. This is my story." And then I'd turn the page and she would say, "This is me. This is my story." And so I went through the whole thing with her saying, "This is my story." And as she was sitting in her chair, she started singing a song in Japanese. And I asked her to pause and come to the front of the room. So I went and I helped her. She sat in the front of the room and she sang this beautiful song and did hand motions. It was beautiful. It was just so touching to see her sharing in this way. And then in the end, I said to her, "Thank you so much for sharing. That was very brave of you to come up and sing your song." And she said, "It's not brave. This is my family." And it was the first time that I realized, oh my gosh, she's been here for 7 years. This is her family. These are the people who she now sees every day. They see the best of her, they see the worst of her. She eats her meals with them, she chats with them, and there's a reason for that. And it's because she arrived in that care community when she was still able to make connections. One of the people I still lead a support group that is a local support group of people in my area, all spouses. And one of the women there talks about her husband and his friends in the care community and how he just, when even when they go out to lunch, she and he wants to go back and see his friends. So I think that oftentimes we have this concept that once people move into long-term care, they are leaving the family, they are leaving love, they are leaving the community, and it is mean to do that to them. But just recognize that it is possible for them to still carry on life. And I think one of the other things that we need to do is to separate ourselves sometimes away from the fact that that the person that we support is on their own life journey. Even though we may be married, we may be their child, we aren't joined at the hip. They have a story which is their life to live, and we have a story which is our life to live. And sometimes we need to just reflect on what would healthy them want. Would healthy them want to see me struggling just to make it through each day? Would healthy them want to know that I sometimes think that I wish they would just die in their sleep because I'm so frustrated and aggravated with them? So these are the things that I just encourage caregivers to just kind of contemplate. Yep, moving when they can still make friends. Okay, got all that. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Um, Certainly there are things that we struggle with. when people move into long-term care, like guilt, especially if we have made a promise. We promised that we would never move her into long-term care. Now we're moving her into long-term care, and I just feel horrible. Of course you do. Of course you do. Nobody wants to leave their family home. Everybody wants to stay there forever. But sometimes that's just not what we can do. And so I get it if you're feeling really guilty. And I hope that you have people that you can talk to, a support group, where you can keep being reminded that you are doing the best that you can and that you're making a choice that really is the right choice for everybody involved. And you count as part of that everybody involved. One of the things that my friend Kate asked me when they were thinking about moving her mom into long-term care is what they would say to her when they got her. They actually they wound up bringing her to a place, and the thought was that it would be respite, and then they would eventually like move her in. And so she asked the question, did we make a big mistake? Because she's saying, I hate it here, I hate it here, I want to go home, I want to go home. And she said, my brother's way of dealing with it is that he says, Mom, there's something wrong with your brain. You're not capable of taking care of yourself anymore. You need to live in this place because they can take care of you. And so, how do you think Mom responded to that? There is nothing wrong with my brain. I want to be in my own home. Who are you to tell me that I can't live in my own home? It's my house. Are you trying to steal my house? And so Kate said that the relationship with her brother and mom had completely fallen apart because mom doesn't trust him. Mom thinks that he's lying to her. And that is what so often happens when we try to push back on the reality of the person who's living with dementia. So, what do we say when somebody says, I want to go home, I want to go home, take me home? And I'll share with you just a couple of different schools of thought about that. So we at Zinnia, we're so excited because we are have been asked by the Validation Education Institute to house their education videos on our site, and we're in the process of moving those over now. The Validation Education Institute is one of, I think it's just magical, but there's a woman by the name of Naomi Feil, Feil, if you're interested. And she is the mother of something called validation theory. And validation theory says that it is never okay to lie to a person with dementia. And what we want to do is just go more deeply into their reality. So, what Naomi Feil would probably have us do when somebody says, I want to go home, I want to go home, I want to go home, is to say, you want to go home? Yeah, you want to go home. Who doesn't want to go home, right? I mean, home is just, pooh, wow, there's nothing better than home. Tell me a little bit more. Now, if you're the family member, right? Tell me, like, what is it that you love the best about home? Because I'll tell you, the thing I love is the way that you hung all of our pictures up from the time that we were little kids, and all those pictures are in the stairwell. I love that. Tell me something you love about home. So the idea is that I'm just trying to go more deeply into their reality in hopes that thinking about that place that they love, home, because home is in us, right? That if we can just go more deeply into that place and enjoy it with them, that we may then be able to get to a point where I say, yeah, hey, you know what? I know that you have some pictures on your dresser of home. Let's go look at that, right? So we want to stay there, celebrate it, and then hope that we can kind of move into another place away from the anxiety. Or another thing that we could do is we could say home. So tell me, what would you do if you were home right now? Just be there with them in that place. Now, some people say that's not going to work with my mother. Let me tell you what, my mother is going to perseverate and she's going to say, I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go home. So there was there was a family that I was working with who were really reflecting, like before they even moved their mom out, they said, our mom wants to go out feet first in a box. There is no way she's leaving this house, but she has to because none of us can take care of her. So what story do we tell her? And they wound up coming up with a story, which was that there was black mold in the house, They had a fake guy come in and investigate and say that there was black mold in the house. They had the neighbors come over and say, "Do you have black mold? We have black mold. We need to move out because there's black mold." And so then they said to their mom, "Oh my God, how lucky that we found this fabulous place that has one room left." It's kind of like a hotel, but they allow people to stay there long term. "We're just going to have you stay there until we fix this problem. It might take months." And the mom left fairly willingly because she didn't want to compromise her health by living in a place with black mold. I'm just sharing that story. Maybe something like that would work in some people's cases. Other people would feel much happier just kind of dealing with the emotion involved and loving on home and not and trying to kind of change the story a little bit. To the question of, oh, to when am I going home is just sort of the same kind of thing. But anyway, so that's my little list of things that I wanted to talk about today, having to do with the question of how do we know when it's time to move somebody out of home, and then a little bit about what do we do once they get there. And I would love to now just kind of open it up. If people are, I don't know who here has loved ones who maybe don't live at home or who are actively thinking about possibly having their loved one live someplace else, but I'd love to hear from people. Jane.
I just had to laugh when you were telling that story because for us, we didn't have to make up a story. What happened was that my mom was cutting paper towels in half. She's in our home that they built, so 60 plus years, so it has cast iron pipes, sewer pipes, and they were all the paper towel that she cut in half was getting caught. And so we're going to have to get the whole sewer system redone. We didn't know what the whole problem was when we actually moved her out. But we had to tell her, "Mom, you can't be there because they have to dig up the whole sewer system." And that is what we really thought was going to have to happen until someone came and found the paper towel and said, "Here's your problem." And so she had to move. You talk about the house getting ruined. Oh my goodness, I could tell you all sorts of stories. But she had to move because we couldn't keep her there anymore. We even had a caregiver living in her home that we hired.
Mhm.
And but yeah, we didn't make up a story. It was the story. And so she had to stay away from home.
That's a great story. So the other option is you can just everybody just start flushing paper towels down. So you have a real story. Jane, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything to that they can kind of share about experiences like this with loved ones?
Hey, this is
I
Christine.
oh, go ahead.
I moved my mother just about 1 year ago, not quite, to memory care. She had been living in my home with me. We had actually lived there together for the last 30 years. And it was the hardest decision of my life. But what you said about making a decision and going and looking at places early, I actually had a friend encourage me to go find a place or to go look at places and get an idea of where I might like to move her. And I was thinking it was probably several months down the road before I would need to do that. And a room became available, and I just felt like it was the right time. And I also had another person encourage me who had been through this. They said, you don't want to have to make that decision about picking a place because it's an emergency. And I really valued that advice. And yeah, like I said, it was the hardest decision of my life. I spent 7 months feeling guilty about it. But I also know it was the right thing to do. And she is in a place that's safe and she's well cared for. And it is crazy expensive, like you said, Allison. But I'm really glad I um, made the move when I did.
Oh my gosh, Christine, thank you so much for that. And I know I want to hear from Dawn. I want to just share one thing about that. You want to go before it's an emergency. Um, Scenario: the person who's living at your house with dementia um, winds up um, doing something that is problematic, and they go to the hospital, and the opinion of everybody there is that they shouldn't go back into the family home. Or something happens to you, right? What happens if you fall? What happens if you get your back goes out? We need to, we need to think ahead to what we would do, what would become of our loved one if something happened to us. And so I think that when you are still pretty healthy, some people even involve the person with dementia in the decision if it's early enough and if they have that level of communication and buy-in. Let's go ahead and visit some of the places that you might eventually live someday. I realize that doesn't work for everybody, but being proactive is a good thing. Dawn, was there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I was just going to share a little bit of my own experience. My mom and dad were living with us, and my dad fell at one point and had to go into. He didn't have any dementia. His were more physical, but my mom has Alzheimer's, and she was about 8 or 9 years into it, and pretty advanced. But he was kind of containing her in their bedroom, and when he went into the hospital and then rehab, her anxiety was just off the charts. And she was up. She's not one that could just sit and watch TV. She was busy, and in particular in the middle of the night, constantly trying to get out, and standing at the foot of our bed and saying, I want to go home, or waking us up. I couldn't even take a shower without her coming to the shower door and saying, I'm going to go home now. And
Hmm.
and so we had those locks, those high locks on the door. And one day, I didn't have them on, and she ran out the front door, and I was seconds behind her, chasing her, and she was running, and she was running fast, and she's 83 years old, and she runs down into the street, and she's chasing a pickup truck down. My neighbor stops. She tells them that we're holding her hostage. She doesn't know who we are. And I'm like, and at that moment, I'm like, I've got to be the one to change what I'm doing because she can't. Anyway, to make a long story short, when we went to the doctor, her doctor said, you have to get her in someplace safe. And we were that emergency, um,
Hmm.
you know, those emergency people. And so my dad was a pastor, and so they don't have a lot of money. And she went into the local nursing home here, and it was like Krisney said, it was the hardest thing I have ever done. My goal was to care for her until the end, but that was not God's plan. He had other plans, and so um um, I ended up having to look at the nursing home like they were extended family, because I didn't have any extra. I have a sister that lives in Kansas. I have a brother that's here, but he has his own family drama and stuff. And so I had ended up having to look at them as like extended family. And then I just kind of, I go every day, I check on her every day, I help when I can, I help support the staff and stuff. But that was getting to that point where I looked at them as kind of family members was kind of a little bit of a help for me.
I'm so glad that you are in a peaceful place with this. And I'm only imagining, I'm picturing you running down the street after your 83-year-old mom who's telling these stories about the fact that you guys are holding her hostage. Most people don't understand dementia. And why not believe that you're actually holding her hostage, right? So I'm so grateful that you have landed in a good place.
Well, the neighbor that actually stopped, his mom had Alzheimer's. And so he said, if you hadn't have been out here, I would just put her in my truck and took her around the block and brought her back. And I'm like, I would have freaked out if you would have done that. But,
Yeah.
still, if I'd have come out and she was gone. But, he did know a little bit about what
Yeah.
was going on.
Thank you. Steve.
Um, I think I mentioned in a previous session that Debbie and I live in a continuing care retirement community. And there's over 300 people that live here at various levels of care. And I have never heard anyone say, we got here too early. It's always, we should have come sooner. We should have come sooner. We got here too late. That's all.
That's some wisdom for us. I hear you. The other piece of wisdom that I wrote down was, Dawn, when you said, I need to be the one who needs to change because she can't. And yeah, amen to that. It is on us to make those changes. Yeah. Opening it up to the room. Anything that anybody would like to share. This is also the opportunity, if there's something that you came into the room today with in your mind or in your heart, something that is heavy and you need a little support, a question about caregiving that we can possibly help with. I also want to invite Angela. You made some great comments in the chat. I wonder if you'd care to actually just share those in case not everybody is getting to the chat.
You just want me to read what I wrote, you mean?
Yeah,
Sorry,
sure.
I'm not a public speaker. That's why I use the chat.
Oh, right. Do you work in dementia care? Your feedback sounds like somebody with some experience.
Yes. So I was a PSW for 2 years, and now I'm an outreach personal support worker with Canadian Mental Health. But I spend most of my time in long-term care working with dementia patients with behaviors
Mm.
and supporting the staff. So figuring out, sometimes I'm a little bit of a detective, just trying to figure out why they're doing what they're doing, and then mentoring the staff with some strategies and things that I've implemented that have been effective.
Wow. Well, I think that everybody here would probably like to rent you. And so I see that in the chat you talked about, yes, the reality that sometimes when they want to go home, it's because there's an unmet need. Maybe they're uncomfortable. Maybe they're not feeling well, right? Maybe they haven't been sleeping well, whatever it might be. And you're suggesting that family pictures, a familiar blanket, throw, music, anything that they loved at home might be good to bring in. I want to take that a little bit deeper. There was I might have shared this with a group before, but there was a lecture, a book that I read where the person who wrote the book was talking about a lecture that he gave where there was a nurse who stood up and she said, I work in long-term care. It's kind of like our friend Angela. And she was saying, I need my mother. I need my mother. This resident in the community that this nurse worked out was saying, I need my mother. I need my mother. I need my mother. Now this woman is like in her 80s or 90s, right? So her mother is no longer living, and everybody would say, "Oh, hon, don't worry, your mother. She's coming around. She's going to be here in just a little while." Or, "Oh, your mother just called. She's stuck in traffic, but she's coming." These are the things they would say to this person. And of course, it might help for a few minutes, but then it would start again. And there is the very real possibility that this person, I mean, may well, in her deepest of places, know that her mother is gone, right? And so now she's not really sure who she can trust because you're telling her her mother's coming, but she kind of knows that her mother is dead. So finally, somebody said to her, if your mother was here, what would she do for you? And she said, if my mother was here, she would love me. So there's that unmet need. What is she looking for? She's not so much, I mean, it would be great if we could conjure up her mother, right? But what she wants is the thing that her mother would give her, which is a sense of comfort and a sense of being well loved. So to Angela's point in the chat, what are they really after? Are they after like that chair in the corner because it's a chair that they love? Or are they after that sense of loss of not having, or rather that sense of not feeling like they belong, right? Not feeling loved, not feeling like they're part of the community. And so the kind of detective work that Angela does, I know, is trying to figure out what is at the core of their response. Angela?
Yeah, you're right. I give out a lot of hugs. Sometimes it's just the affection that they need. But
Mhm.
one time I had a pillow made with the person's picture on it. So if it was her mother, then you get the staff on board, right? And when she's asking for her mother, you can actually go get her on the pillow. That was very effective.
You had a pillow made with her mother's picture on the pillow? Oh man, that's brilliant.
Yes.
I'll be using that one and I will credit you. I really like that. And I also loved the thing that you said to, when your loved ones say that, to promise you that you'll never take them to long-term care. Angela says, I always tell people to never make that promise because sometimes you can never keep that promise. And you do what you can until you can't anymore. And to have legitimate conversations. I think that it's so easy to say, oh, don't worry, mom, don't worry, mom. We would never move you out. But maybe to use that as an opportunity to actually have a deeper conversation about what reality holds. And Will, let's say, he says, Will, do you want to just unmute and say your thought, share your thought?
Sure. I was just saying that in the past, when my mom was more mobile, and she wanted to go home, um, take her out into the car and take her for a short drive around the neighborhood and bring her right back home. And she would be fine with that. So that sometimes can work too.
Yeah, I bet it does because by the time you're in the car and you're going for a ride, it just sort of changes the dynamic, doesn't it? It sets the tone
You're
differently. It
you're
really
addressing
does.
what they want, and then they calm down, but kind of forget about it.
I love that. I really do. And you also said to make sure that you give your loved one some water, something to snack on, have them go to the bathroom. Look for what
In
else.
terms of unmet needs. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What are the unmet needs? That's the great way to say that. Yeah, there was a care community that had residents. It wasn't in the United States. I don't even remember now where it was. Probably the Netherlands. They do everything so interestingly there. But the people, everybody was used to traveling by bus. That's how they would get around. And so the people would say they want to go home. And so eventually the care community put a fake bus stop in front of the building. And when people wanted to go home, they would say, no problem. Let's get your coat. Come on, let's go ahead. I'll bring you out to the bus stop. And that really there was nobody. Eventually they would sit at the bus stop and eventually they'd come back in and kind of be over. um, I don't know, I just think that it is on us, right, as our friend Dawn said, to be creative and think about how do we change things, and Angela be the detective and try to figure out what the unmet need is. Yeah. Anything else? Any issues that anybody's running into? We have a great room of people here who have lots of great stories and advice. So if you have a question, you are in the right place to ask it. Yeah, Debbie. And then we'll get to Jennifer.
No worries.
I wonder when this group will meet again. Does this group meet on a regular basis? I just happened to stumble across the invite today, but when will it meet again?
It will meet again in 4 weeks. So actually, the next meeting is going to be, hold on one second, because I had to change it because I have a doctor's appointment that I was unable to change. I'll give you the exact date. The other thing I do want to let you know about is that we have let me just get to the right account here. The next one is going to be in August, and it's going to be on August. It was supposed to be on it's going to be on August 21st at this same time from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. I also do want to let you know, and then we're going to hear from Jennifer, that in addition to meeting once a month in this forum, which is, I only send this invitation to people who either are or have subscribed to Zinnia. So those are the only people who we invite. But we have another support group that I started that meets once a month as well. And that is called our Superhero Support Series. And I did that because I had coffee recently with a woman whose loved one had just been diagnosed, and she had no idea. I said, "Well, have you looked at Natalie Edwards' Care Blazers videos?" And she was like, "I don't know who that is." I said, "Well, what about Deepest Snow?" And she said, "I don't know who that is." "Are you on social media? Because Dementia Darling has all kinds of posts with resources." And she was like, "I don't know what that is." And so I thought, okay, I have so many heroes in the dementia space, people who I think are just incredibly powerfully wise. And I want to get them out in the world, let people know about them. So we're doing this superhero support series where each month I will have a different one of my heroes in a room just like this. And instead of me being the one who delivers the initial lesson or whatever, it will be the visiting superhero. And so the next one that's coming up is it's going to be next week, actually. Is it next week? Oh, let me open up my whole calendar. It's going to be next week, superhero support session, Thursday the 24th, and it will be from 12 until 1:30 Pacific time. And if I can get my act together here, I can grab the link and put it in the chat in case anybody wants to register for that. Let me go ahead and save that. And Jennifer, I would love to hear from you.
Hi. I just got to thinking as folks were talking about how they were dealing with their family members and so on. I'm activities director here at our skilled nursing center, and I think our census is generally around 55, 60, right around in there. But we do have one gentleman who has come to us recently, and he's very active, we'll say active, always looking for a way to go and where to go and God, let's go. And so we kind of actually even changed our entire activity program for in the afternoon during that sundowning kind of time to do some sensory stuff just focused on him. But all day long, he's busy with something. He's always something. But just before we started this meeting, his wife was here and she went to my assistant and said, "Well, he told me he's bored. What are you guys actually doing for him?" And I thought, oh my gosh, what are we not doing for him? We do more for him than any of the other, 40 some people in here. But she said specifically, what are you doing sensory activity today for him? And my assistant said, it really just depends on the day. And it actually is whatever he's feeling at the moment. I need to go outside. I need to play the piano. I need to, and it was kind of, I just got to thinking as listening to people that it's hard to people who are, I've been here 25 years, and for people who don't know the way things roll, I mean, nothing is set in stone. There's no books that are exact. It's hard to tell them, well, we're going to go with where they're at today. We're going to their reality or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense.
I'll understand.
Yeah, so I taught for 4 years. I taught in long-term care. So I was like in long-term care communities, teaching dementia stuff to the caregivers. And there is such a special place in my heart for people who dedicate themselves to helping people living with dementia have better lives. And when you have those folks who are, especially when you get people with younger dementia who are so physically fit, right? And they just want to go, 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 go. And how do you find enough activities? I maintain that the best ratio for people with dementia to caregivers is 1-to-1, obviously. But when they're in long-term care, you can't possibly do that. So my hat goes off to you guys for being so proactive and trying so hard to assess where is he, what does he need in the moment. And unfortunately, for many, many families, there's just not enough that we can do, right? That yeah, right. You had him come here because you couldn't keep him busy. So
Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. Is there anything that we can offer you in terms of support, or it sounds like you got it, but that you're just
Actually,
sharing your reality?
well, and actually, someone came to me a few days ago, well, it was probably last Friday, and said, "I want you to try this program, your program, Zinnia." Is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I said, "Great, we'll look into we can look into anything. We'll try anything." And so that's how I got hooked up with this, was because someone
Oh,
said, "Let's try it." So I have a meeting with Bill tomorrow.
Bill.
Bill,
Yeah.
Bill, yeah, on getting signed up for your program. So we're gonna try your stuff as well to help our.
Oh, that's great. You know,
Thank-
the website does have free videos on it too, if
Yeah.
you wanted to just try some videos with him. And there are quizzes that he might find interesting if he
Mhm.
likes, you know, kind of intellectual stimulation.
Yeah, is
Yeah.
like a mechanical engineer of some da 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 da. So yeah,
Do
yes,
you bring in things for him to build, like an erector set or Tinker
yep,
Toys or Lincoln Logs,
yep.
any of those kinds of things, train sets?
We got an engine. He built the engine, and I did a woodworking thing. He did that. We got him a piano. We got him all kinds of fidget things you can even imagine. Yeah, yeah. So
Okay. All right.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm excited about your program, though. Thanks.
Thank you. I hope it works well for you. And we
Yeah,
have
yeah.
time for just one more. Jane, what's up?
So I mentioned this last time when you said the one-on-one, and when my mom was in rehab, Zinnia was my lifesaver. I mean, we
Oh,
used it constantly, and I told it to anybody that would listen. And some of the PT people that were there, other people, they said, "Oh, we're going to check into this," because they tell me, "Oh, they're going to come in and get her up." So I'd put the rooster on and the good morning and all of that, and it just was so amazing. But
okay.
I have a question for you. This is
Please.
only my theory from observation, but in regard to people with dementia, intellectual or factual memory versus emotional memory.
Mhm.
My brother would say, even before we moved my mom out of her house, "Well, Jane, when you come, mom forgets that you were here 5 minutes after you leave."
Mhm.
She would say, "Well, then what difference does it make if I visit or not, But I just have to wonder, when good things happen to a person, you get a dopamine hit, right? So when a family member visits, and I know the people are supposed to be their family, but my mom is very, very family oriented with us. When you come as a family member, she never fails to say, she's so glad to see me. I think, is there like maybe a dopamine hit that creates like an emotional memory? So if you don't see her for like 5 days, she just gets kind of, but I don't know that for a fact. And so I have to wonder, do they sense that you've gone, that you haven't seen them for several days, versus when you do? They can't remember or mentally, but can they remember? Is there an emotional memory because of the dopamine hit of something good? Their family came, they're happy, so their body is physically happy for a moment, but it goes away if you don't come back multiple times.
Yep. That is such a great point, and I'm so glad that you raised it. I wouldn't say that it's an emotional memory. What I would say is that what I hear from so many people who work in long-term care is that, boy, when Mrs. Whatever's daughter comes, Mrs. Whatever is so delightful for the rest of the day. And so she may, if you were to ask her, like, when was the last time you saw your daughter? She would say, "Oh, but that Jane, she just never visits anymore." But you were just there. But yet she's in a great mood. She doesn't know why she's in a great mood,
Yeah.
but it's because of the fact that the visit did exactly that. It like washed her brain with happy juice. And so now that hangs on for a while. And so when I run into people who say, like, I don't even why I'm not even going to visit my mom anymore. I mean, what's the point? 10 minutes after I've gone, she doesn't remember that I was there. But
Yeah.
her brain is responding to the joy that she felt when you were there, and that lingers.
Yeah.
And in the same way, if they, there's a guy who was in my support group, and the community where his wife lived asked him to please stop visiting because every time that he visited, she would be in a terrible mood afterwards. And so, and she didn't remember that he'd been there, but when he was there, she would get really, really amped up about why am I here? Why? And she never ever went there unless he came. So he reminded her there was nothing good that came of the visit. And so he went for a period of time. It was very, very hard for him. He talked to the staff all the time. They assured her, like, she's great. She's happy. She's hanging out with the other residents. This is her life. And you are the reminder that maybe there was another life. So it's a real balancing act. But I think
Yeah.
that if visits are joyful and they leave the person feeling good, visit. Yeah.
Mhm.
Dawn, let's go ahead and hear from you, and then we're gonna close out.
Just to follow up with her, I typically visit my mom every day. And I went out of town it was like 3 days. And the nurses said, your mom was going around looking from window to window. She can't even say my name. She doesn't call me by my name. Sometimes she'll say I'm her mother, which I'm sure it probably feels that way. But she went from window to window looking for me. And so
Wow.
I think there is, even though she can't, if you said, 5 minutes after I left, did Dawn come by? She would say no, or whatever. She would shake her head, or she might just stare at you. But there is something that makes a connection where they truly know. I believe, at least at this stage where she's in, and she's probably she's pretty advanced,
Mhm.
but that she does know to some degree, because if I'm not there for a couple of days, she shows some signs of it.
I love that. I mean, I love the fact that even though she does not necessarily identify you as Dawn, you might just be the nice lady who visits, right? But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because the nice lady who visits makes her feel really good. And she's looking out the window, thinking maybe that nice lady's going to show up. So, yeah, I think she probably does notice when you've not been able to visit for a few days. And she's probably just really touched when you do show up. She feels it. She feels it in her heart. Wow. Well, everybody, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much. I am going to post a recording, and I do absolutely stand by. If you later on today you're like, I can't believe I said that, just let me know, because we will be sharing this. And I just want everybody to leave today knowing that you did a great thing for yourself by being here today. Keep taking good care of yourselves. Yeah. All right. Have a great rest of the day, everybody. Bye bye.